This was supposed to be a joke. A dumb, harmless inside joke between me and my best friend that somehow turned into the most humiliating and confusing moment of my entire college life. It started in the student lounge, the kind of rainy afternoon where time moves weirdly slow and everything feels slightly off. My best friend Leo and I were killing time between classes, laptops open, coffee cups half empty, and our stress levels hitting that point where everything starts to feel hilarious. We were working on our midterm papers for Dr. Emery's literature seminar. Dr. Nathan Emery, the youngest professor in the English department, early 30s, sharp jaw, glasses that always slid down his nose, and that habit of saying things like, "language is desire," while making eye contact just a second too long. Completely unremarkable. He totally has a main character complex, Leo said, scrolling through an article. But you'd still let him ruin your life. I tried not to smile. He does not. Oh, please, Leo smirked. You literally quoted him in your notes last week, like it was scripture. I shrugged, pretending to focus on my screen. I just respect the man's opinions. Respect, he said in air quotes. And yet you know exactly what brand of pen he uses. I gave him a look. I'm observant. You're obsessed, he teased. Then he leaned over, nodding toward my document. Dude, you should write him a love letter. Go full Jane Austen. My dearest professor, I yearn for the days you discuss metaphor with such fervor. I laughed, because it was stupid and perfect, and exactly the kind of thing we did to entertain ourselves during mental breakdown season. So I opened a new document and just started typing. For the bit, it was pure satire. Your lectures stir something primal in me. I dream of whiteboards and syllabi, and your subtle disdain for postmodernists. Leo was in tears by the time I ended it with, hopelessly yours, a boy lost in the margins. We were dying. I saved it on my desktop as professorcrush_final.docx, just to be extra dramatic. It should have ended there. But 2 days later, I submitted my midterm essay to the course Dropbox, in a haze of sleeplessness and triple shot espresso. You already know where this is going. I sent the wrong file. Yep. Instead of my meticulously researched 2,000-word paper on desire and identity in queer Gothic literature, I submitted a fake, painfully detailed love letter to Dr. Nathan Emery himself. It took me a full 12 hours to realize it. I only noticed when I was checking the course site for feedback and saw that my file was already marked as opened. I didn't even scream, I just closed my laptop slowly, sat back in my chair and stared at the ceiling like I was waiting for God to smite me where I sat. Leo, naturally, thought it was the funniest thing that had ever happened in the history of academia. This is your villain origin story, he said between gasps of laughter. You're gonna have to drop out and re-enroll under a fake name. I was trying not to hyperventilate. I can fix this, I told him. I'll just email him and explain it was a mistake. But before I could draft an apology, my phone buzzed with a new email. From Dr. Nathan Emery, subject, your submission. I swear my soul left my body for a second. I tapped it open, bracing myself. Dear Adrian, I read your submission. While it was not quite what I was expecting, I found it illuminating. Would you be available to meet during my office hours this Thursday at 4 p.m.? Best, Dr. Emery. He didn't say it was a mistake. He didn't laugh it off. He didn't even sound mad. Just illuminating? What the hell did that mean? Leo was no help. This is giving forbidden romance, dark academia realness. I groaned, my stomach twisting into knots. He's going to think I'm a stalker. Or he's going to confess he's secretly been in love with you this whole time? Leo said, dead serious. He wasn't helping. Thursday came faster than I was ready for. And that meeting? It didn't go at all the way I thought it would. I don't know what I expected walking into Dr. Emery's office that Thursday, but I definitely didn't expect whatever that was. His office was in the oldest building on campus. Creaky floors, tall windows, shelves lined with books that probably hadn't been touched since the 90s. There were 2 armchairs facing each other in front of his desk, and a soft amber light coming from a floor lamp that gave the whole place this weirdly cozy, almost too intimate feel. I stood awkwardly in the doorway, backpack clutched against my chest like a shield. He looked up from his desk and gave me a slight smile. Adrian, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Come in." His tone was unreadable. Not cold, not overly warm. Calm, measured. But there was something behind his eyes I couldn't quite place. I sat down slowly, trying not to breathe too loud. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, voice higher than usual. He gave a small nod. "Of course. I figured it would be better to talk in person than over email." I swallowed, forcing a smile. "Right. So about that letter." "I read it," he interrupted gently, then leaned back in his chair. "Twice, actually." My face burned. I couldn't meet his eyes. "It was a mistake," I said quickly. "I mean, it wasn't. I didn't mean for you to see it. My friend and I were just messing around. It was this inside joke, and I was sleep deprived, and I accidentally uploaded the wrong file and... Adrian." I froze. He said my name in a way that made everything in me go still, not angry, not mocking, just quiet, intentional. He waited until I looked at him. "I know it wasn't your midterm paper," he said. "Obviously." I gave a nervous laugh. "Yeah, I figured you'd notice that." His mouth twitched like he was trying not to smile. "What I wasn't expecting," he continued, "was how surprisingly well written it was." That caught me off guard. "What?" He tilted his head. "The language. The structure. It was exaggerated, yes, but there was clarity to it. A kind of emotional honesty behind the sarcasm." I stared at him, totally thrown. He glanced at the letter. The printed copy was sitting on his desk. Of course it was. And tapped it lightly with one finger. "There are lines in here that feel less like a joke and more like someone trying not to say something real," he said. "Would you agree?" I didn't know what to say, because the truth was, he wasn't wrong. Sure, the letter was over the top and ridiculous on purpose, but I had written it. And when you write something, even if it's meant to be satire, some part of it always leaks truth. And maybe I had paid too much attention to the way he dressed, or the things he said in class, or the way his voice dipped when he read certain passages aloud. Maybe it wasn't just a joke, but what was I supposed to say to that? "It was meant to be funny," I mumbled, avoiding his eyes again. "I didn't think anyone would ever read it." He nodded. "I understand that." A pause. One of those long ones that makes your skin crawl with anticipation. "And yet," he said slowly, "now that I have read it, the question becomes, what do we do with it?" I blinked. "Do with it?" He stood up then, walked to one of the tall windows and looked out. Rain was pattering softly against the glass. "I've been teaching here for 7 years," he said, still facing away. "And I've received all kinds of emails from students. Angry ones, grateful ones, even a few awkwardly flirtatious ones." He turned his head slightly. "But never something quite like that." I wasn't sure if I wanted to die or just crawl under the armchair and never come out again. "I'm sorry," I said. "I really am. I didn't mean to put you in a weird position." He turned back to face me. "You didn't." His tone was firm. "Certain you didn't put me in a weird position," he said again, more gently this time. "If anything, you reminded me that students are human, that sometimes we pretend not to notice when there's more happening under the surface." I looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then stepped back toward his desk, sitting down again. But this time, not behind it. He took the other armchair, so we were eye level. He folded his hands in his lap. "I've noticed you in class, Adrian. You're one of the few students who actually looks like they want to be there." I flushed. "It's a good class." He smiled faintly. "Thank you. But it's more than that. You engage. You ask questions. You stay behind sometimes, like you want to keep the conversation going." I shrugged, embarrassed. "I like the way you teach." There was a short silence. Then he said, "I like the way you listen." My stomach flipped. What the hell was happening? This was the part where he was supposed to say, "Anyway, I'm giving you an extension. Please turn in your actual paper and never mention this again." That was what I had been preparing for. Instead, he was, complimenting me? I don't want you to feel like you're in trouble, he said. You're not. But I also don't want to ignore the fact that you've shared something personal, even accidentally. I laughed nervously. Accidentally is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. His expression softened. So then let me ask you something. I tensed. Okay. He looked right at me. Was any of it true? The question landed like a punch to the gut. My mouth went dry. I didn't know how to answer that. Part of me wanted to deny everything, laugh it off, say, God, no, of course not, and make a break for the door. But another part of me, the one that wrote the damn letter in the first place, was tired of pretending. I cleared my throat. I don't know, I said slowly. Maybe? I think I admire you. A lot. And sometimes admiration gets tangled up with other stuff. He nodded like he understood. Okay, he said quietly. Thank you for being honest. He stood up again, this time walking around to his desk, picking up a paperclip and fiddling with it. I won't report this, he said plainly. There's nothing inappropriate in the letter. It's not harassment. It's not a violation of any code. But I held my breath. But we both know that lines can blur, he continued, and I'm not going to pretend like I didn't feel something reading it, something I probably shouldn't have. I stared at him. He wasn't looking at me now. He was focused on the paperclip, twisting it gently in his fingers. I'll accept your actual midterm paper by Monday, he said finally. And after that, I think we should keep things professional, for both our sakes. I nodded, even though my chest felt tight. Of course, I said. Yeah, totally. He looked up and met my eyes, and for the first time since I walked into the room, there was something raw there, something unguarded. Adrian, he said, voice low, just so you know, it wasn't a bad letter. And then he gave me the smallest smile, something almost sad, before turning back to his laptop. Meeting adjourned, I stood up, walked out of the office, and didn't let myself exhale until I was halfway across the quad. But the weirdest part? I couldn't stop thinking about the way he said my name, and how he didn't say no. The days after that meeting were strange. Not in a dramatic, my world is upside down kind of way. Just subtly off, like my brain couldn't decide how I was supposed to feel. I kept replaying our conversation in Dr. Emery's office over and over in my head, dissecting every word, every glance, every pause. He hadn't been angry. He hadn't made fun of me. He hadn't even dismissed it outright. If anything, he'd been thoughtful. And that was worse somehow, because it left room for interpretation. And interpretation is a dangerous game when you're already half in your head and halfway into a crush you didn't mean to have. I turned in my actual midterm essay the following Monday. I didn't say anything else in the email. No apology, no explanation, just a simple, please find my corrected submission attached, like I was trying to pretend the last week hadn't happened. Class that week was more awkward than usual, but only for me. Dr. Emery acted exactly the same. He lectured with the same calm voice, the same neatly scribbled whiteboard notes, the same occasional pauses to ask us questions that made us squirm. If he was weirded out by what had happened, he didn't show it. But I noticed the differences. They were small. The way he glanced in my direction when he quoted from Giovanni's room. The way his gaze lingered on mine for just a second longer than necessary when I raised my hand. The way, at the end of class, he hesitated, barely, before saying, "See you Thursday, Adrian." By the end of the week, I wasn't sure if I was going insane or if something really was there. Leo, of course, was zero help. "You're spiraling," he said, not looking up from his phone. "You need to get laid." I threw a pillow at him. "I need clarity." "No," he said, catching the pillow one-handed. "You need boundaries, or a blackout weekend where you don't think about your hot professor for 48 hours. Too late for that." He paused, then looked at me. "Wait, are you saying something did happen?" "No," I said, exasperated. But also, not nothing. That made him set his phone down. "Talk." So I did. I told him about the office visit. About the way Dr. Emery said the letter wasn't a problem. About the weirdly specific compliment, and especially the part where he said it made him feel something. Leo stared at me. Then he said, "Dude, he's into you," I groaned. "He literally said we should keep things professional." "Yeah," Leo said, leaning forward, "but that's what people say when they can't act on something they want to." I narrowed my eyes. "Why are you making this worse?" "Because it's juicy," he grinned, "and also because I think you're in denial." Maybe I was, but denial was safer than the alternative. Because the truth was, every time I saw Dr. Emery now, there was this electric undercurrent between us. I was hyper aware of everything. The sound of his voice, the brush of his fingers against a book spine, the way he glanced out the window between thoughts like he was trying to control his expression. I caught him once, during a lull in discussion, just staring at me, not in a creepy way, just watching, like he was trying to read something in my face. When I met his eyes, he didn't look away. He just held it, steady, quiet, meaningful, and I felt it, that tiny pull. So, yeah, maybe Leo was right. But what the hell was I supposed to do with that? By the time mid-November rolled around, the tension between us felt like a second skin. I'd start sweating during lectures. I avoided going to his office hours. I kept my answers short in class just to avoid being noticed, but it didn't matter. I could feel him noticing me anyway. It all came to a head on a Thursday after class. Everyone had filtered out except me. I was moving slower than usual, trying to gather my things while mentally debating whether I should say something, anything, just to cut the tension. I didn't have to. "Adrian," he said, just as I was zipping up my bag. I looked up. He was leaning against the edge of the desk, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "I wanted to ask," he paused, "have you thought any more about our last conversation?" My heart jumped. "The letter?" He nodded. I swallowed. "Yeah, I've thought about it a lot, actually." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Me too." I waited for him to elaborate. He didn't. Instead, he straightened and walked to the door, then did something that made my pulse spike. He closed it, quietly, gently, but firmly. We were alone now. I sat down slowly, more to ground myself than anything. My fingers tightened around the strap of my bag. "I'm not trying to make this inappropriate," he said, walking back toward his desk. "But I think it would be dishonest not to admit that I've noticed you, more than a professor probably should." My chest tightened. "Oh," he smiled faintly at my reaction. "That's not meant to make you uncomfortable. I just wanted you to know I didn't forget what you wrote. I felt like I was burning from the inside out." "I meant some of it," I said quietly. "I didn't realize it when I wrote it, but yeah." There was a long pause. He looked at me for a moment, really looked at me, then said, "You're graduating this year, right?" I nodded. He walked to the window again, arms behind his back, like he was thinking through every word. "Then maybe," he said slowly, "we can revisit this conversation when the semester ends." It wasn't a promise, but it wasn't a rejection either. It was a door, a quiet, carefully cracked open door that said, "Not yet, but maybe." And the thing is, that might have been enough for me. After that conversation, something shifted between us. Not drastically. No lines were crossed. No forbidden trysts behind locked office doors or cinematic confessions in empty lecture halls. But the air between us had changed, and I wasn't imagining it anymore. We kept things professional, technically, but there was a subtle heat in the way we spoke now, a softness in his voice when he said my name, a spark in his eyes when I asked a question he found genuinely interesting. He smiled more, not for the class, but for me, just me. And I felt like I was constantly walking this line between anxiety and anticipation, between telling myself it didn't mean anything and knowing, deep down, that it absolutely did. Leo noticed, of course. "You're glowing," he said over brunch one Saturday, stabbing his pancake like it had personally offended him. "It's disgusting." I rolled my eyes. "I'm not glowing." "You are. It's like a gay little halo hovering around your head." "What did he say to you?" I hesitated. Then I told him. About how Dr. Emery closed the door. About how he said he'd noticed me. About how he suggested we revisit the conversation after the semester. Leo put down his fork. Dude, that's basically a green light. It's more like a very cautious yellow, I said. Yeah, well, if he ever actually acts on it, I expect a full play-by-play. You're such a perv, Leo grinned. And you're in denial that you're living the plot of a queer romance novel. He wasn't wrong. I did feel like I was in a story I hadn't meant to write, one where the lines between fiction and reality kept blurring in unexpected ways. The weeks that followed were a strange mix of normal college chaos and subtle emotional turbulence. Dr. Emery continued teaching like nothing had changed, but now I noticed every flicker of hesitation when our eyes met, every casual glance that lingered a beat too long, every barely there smile that tugged at the corners of his mouth when I made a particularly clever observation. There were times I swore he wanted to say something more, but he never did, and I respected that. I also hated it, because if I was honest, I was starting to feel a little obsessed. Not in a creepy stalker way, more like an involuntary gravitational pull. He was in my thoughts more than he should have been, not just because he was attractive, or because of that damn letter, but because he got me. In class, when he quoted a passage and asked the room to unpack it, I always felt like he was daring me to speak. Like he wanted to know what I thought, not just what the textbook said. And when I did speak, he listened, really listened, like my thoughts mattered. It was intoxicating. And then, one day in early December, something happened that changed everything again. It was a Friday afternoon, the last class before the winter break. Snow had started to fall outside, the first real storm of the season. Everyone was distracted, half the students not even bothering to show up. But I was there, front row as usual, laptop open, notebook ready, pretending I wasn't itching for some kind of acknowledgement from him. Dr. Emery stood in front of the class, flipping through his notes. This won't be a heavy lecture, he said. Think of it as more of a wrap-up before break. He glanced around the room. His eyes landed on me for a second too long. We've covered a lot this semester, he continued. Desire, identity, power dynamics, the ways we use language to both reveal and obscure who we are. My chest tightened. He wasn't looking at me now, but he didn't have to. I felt it anyway, and since most of you are eager to get out of here, I'll keep it brief. The class let out a collective sigh of relief, and students started closing their laptops early, murmuring about buses, finals, and who had weed. But I didn't move. I sat there, watching him gather his things, feeling something curl hot in my stomach. That pull again. As the room emptied, I stayed behind, pretending to organize my notes. When the last person finally left, I stood, heart in my throat. Dr. Emery looked up from his desk. Adrian, he said softly, you didn't have to stay. I shrugged. I know. A beat of silence. The sound of the wind howling faintly outside. He leaned back in his chair. Everything okay? I nodded. Yeah. I just didn't want the semester to end without saying thanks. He smiled, but it was tinged with something else. For what? For not making me feel like an idiot, I said. About the letter. About everything. He looked at me, and this time there was no hiding the warmth in his eyes. You were never an idiot, he said. If anything, you were brave. I looked down, cheeks burning. It didn't feel brave. It felt like one long panic attack. He laughed, and the sound made something in me ease. For a moment, the tension broke. I stepped closer to his desk, and he didn't move away. Outside, the snow fell harder. The campus was growing quiet. I don't know what happens next, I said, suddenly, not sure why I was even saying it. Neither did he. I saw it in the way his smile faded a little, replaced by that same careful uncertainty I'd seen in his office weeks ago. I don't either, he said honestly, but I know I've thought about it more than I should. My breath caught. After the semester, I said, repeating his words back to him. He nodded slowly. After the semester. Then, in the softest voice, he added, but I hope you don't disappear over break. I tilted my head. You want me to email you? He gave me a small, helpless shrug. You're not technically my student once grades are in. I laughed. Technically, he smiled. Just don't send another letter titled Professor Crush _final. I groaned, burying my face in my hands. You weren't supposed to know the file name. Too late. There was a beat of shared laughter, and then stillness. He stood slowly, walking to the window. He didn't turn around when he said it. I think about what I would have said if you'd meant that letter. I froze. Yeah? He nodded. But I won't tell you. Not yet. My heart was pounding now. A steady, insistent thump that echoed in my ears. Why not? He turned finally, and his expression was almost unreadable. Almost. Because if I tell you now, he said, it wouldn't be the right version of me saying it. And somehow, that made sense. Even if it killed me. Winter break passed slowly. Or maybe it passed too fast. I couldn't really tell. There was something unsettling about being out of school, out of routine, and yet constantly aware of the one thing that had taken over most of my mental space since that rainy afternoon in November. Dr. Emery, Nathan, if I dared think of him that way, lingered in my head like background music I couldn't turn off. Even when I was back at home surrounded by my family, fake laughing through dinners and half listening to cousins talk about internships and ski trips, my mind kept circling back to that last moment in his classroom. I think about what I would have said if you'd meant that letter. The way he'd said it, quiet, honest, like he was pulling a piece of himself out and leaving it between us without knowing if I'd pick it up or walk away from it. I didn't email him. I told myself I wouldn't. Not because I didn't want to, but because I wanted to respect that unspoken boundary we'd drawn together. But that didn't stop me from typing out a message late one night and just staring at it. Subject: just saying hi. Hi, Dr. Emery. I know I'm not technically your student anymore, and I'm not trying to make things weird, but I keep thinking about what you said. I've been trying not to. I've been trying to be rational. But the truth is, I did mean parts of the letter. I just didn't realize it until I saw your face while reading it. I don't know what happens next either, but I know I'm not ready for this to be over. Adrian the First never sent it. I just saved it to drafts and went to bed. Still, when the semester started up again, I checked the faculty site like an addict. Even though I knew he wasn't teaching the advanced lit seminar anymore, someone else had taken over. I couldn't stop myself from clicking on his name, seeing his face, rereading the blurb about his academic focus as if it would suddenly say something new. I didn't expect to see him again anytime soon, and I definitely didn't expect to run into him at the campus bookstore 2 weeks into the new term. I was in the back, flipping through a painfully overpriced anthology for one of my new classes, when I caught a glimpse of someone familiar near the checkout line. The curve of a jaw, the fall of dark hair, the gray coat. I froze. It was him. Nathan. He looked the same and not. Still sharp, still composed, but softer somehow. He wasn't wearing his usual office attire. No tweed blazer or button-up, just a black sweater and dark jeans, coat folded over one arm, fingers trailing the edge of a display like he was lost in thought. My heart started pounding. I should have left. That would have been the safe, non-awkward option. But I didn't. I just stood there like a deer caught in headlights. Until he turned and saw me. His expression changed instantly. First surprise, then something quieter, warmer. Adrian, he said, and hearing my name and his voice again made something inside me twist. Hey, I said, suddenly hyper-aware of everything. My unwashed hoodie, the way my hands were trembling slightly, the knot forming in my throat. We stared at each other for a moment. Then he smiled, just slightly. Buying overpriced textbooks? Trying not to, I said, and he laughed. God, I had missed that sound. He walked closer, standing a few feet away, but somehow it felt like there was no one else in the entire store. I didn't know you were still on campus, I said. Only just got back last week, he replied. I'm teaching a new course this semester. Small, more focused, less emotionally charged. I laughed and it came out shaky. He didn't break eye contact. I've thought about reaching out. he said. My breath caught. But I didn't want to put pressure on you, he added. I didn't want to take advantage of anything. You wouldn't have been, I said, a little too fast. He tilted his head. Are you sure? I nodded. I've been waiting for a chance to talk to you. Something in his posture eased. I was hoping you'd say that. A pause. Then, quietly, he asked, Do you have time for coffee? I could have sworn my heart stopped for a second. Yeah, I said, nodding. I do. We walked in silence down the street to a small cafe near the edge of campus. The kind of place professors liked. Quiet, dim, full of overworked grad students pretending they were fine. We sat by the window. 2 black coffees, no small talk. Just silence, until he broke it. I've read that letter 3 more times since the semester ended, he said, hands around his cup. My stomach flipped. I know I shouldn't have, he continued, but I kept thinking about the way you phrased things, how it was meant to be a joke but still carried, something sincere. It was sincere, I said. He nodded slowly. I could tell. I looked down at my cup. You said you think about what you would have said, if it had been real. He didn't answer right away. Then, finally, he said, I would have told you that I liked the way you see me. That sometimes it feels like you understand things about me. I don't even say out loud. I would have said that it's been hard pretending I didn't feel something too. My hands tightened around the coffee mug. I looked up at him. You don't have to pretend anymore. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, not quite not. I'm still your professor, he said softly, even if technically you're no longer my student. And I'm still me, I replied, which means I'm going to overthink this 100 times before I fall asleep tonight. He chuckled. Then, like it was nothing, like it was the most natural thing in the world, he reached across the table and covered my hand with his. I don't know where this is going, he said, but I'd like to find out. I stared at our hands, his fingers long and steady, mine slightly trembling. Me too, I said, and in that moment I wasn't nervous anymore. Just open. Just ready. We didn't kiss that night. We didn't even hug when we left the cafe. We just walked out together, side by side, his hand brushing against mine in a way that felt more electric than any full-body touch. It was restraint, deliberate, careful, frustrating, in the best possible way. Like we both knew it wasn't about rushing. Something real was starting, and neither of us wanted to screw it up. Over the next few weeks, we settled into this strange, in-between rhythm. We texted now, just enough to make it feel intentional. Not so much that it felt reckless. The messages were thoughtful. Soft. Him, I reread Baldwin tonight. It made me think of you. Me. You mean the quote you tortured us with for 3 lectures? Him. The very one. And yes, I stand by it. Sometimes he'd send me a song, or a paragraph from a novel we'd never covered in class. Nothing overtly romantic, but always intimate in a way that made my chest tighten. I found myself looking forward to the buzz of my phone more than I wanted to admit. It was all very quiet, very controlled. But beneath it, there was this slow-burning anticipation that was becoming harder to ignore. I still saw him around campus. Less now, but when I did, there was always a moment. A glance exchanged across the quad, a subtle nod in the hallway. No one else would notice anything unusual, but I felt it. I think he did too. And then came the night that changed everything. It was mid-February, cold enough that the wind stung your face and your bones felt hollow just from walking between buildings. I had stayed late at the library finishing a group project, or more accurately, fixing a group project everyone else had half-assed. I was exhausted, carrying 3 books I didn't need, when I stepped into the cafe across from campus to defrost for a bit. I hadn't even taken 2 steps inside when I saw him. Nathan. He was at a table by the window, alone, Glasses on, hair a little messy like he'd been running his hands through it. There was a paperback beside his coffee cup and a notepad covered in his usual half-legible scribbles. I froze. He looked up. For a moment, he just stared at me. Then he smiled. "Hey," he said, and it was soft in that way that still made my breath catch. "Hey," I said, walking over like I wasn't already melting inside. "You grading souls tonight?" He chuckled. "Something like that. You cold?" "I think my brain is frozen," I said, shaking the snow out of my hair. "Sit," he said immediately. "I'll get you something warm." I didn't. I started, but he was already up, already ordering for me without asking. He remembered my coffee order. Of course he did. When he came back, we sat in silence for a few minutes. Then, as he handed me the cup, our fingers touched. Not accidental, not casual, just long enough. I stared at the cup for a second longer than necessary before speaking. "I almost emailed you again," I admitted, not looking up. "Oh," he asked, voice steady. "Yeah. Around the new year, I wrote this whole thing, didn't send it." He nodded slowly. "I figured. I just didn't know what the rules were." "There aren't any now," he said simply. "We're both adults. I'm not your professor anymore." I finally looked at him. "So what does that make us?" He held my gaze. "I don't know yet." Silence. The cafe had mostly emptied out. Outside, snow clung to the windows. Inside, everything felt muffled and still. It was like the whole world had quieted just for us. "Come over," he said. I blinked. "What?" His voice didn't change. "Not like that," he clarified. "I mean, come over. I'll make dinner. We can actually talk. In private." My heart flipped. "Like a date?" He smiled. "Yes, Adrian, like a date." His apartment wasn't what I expected. I think I imagined something austere. Bookshelves, clean surfaces, the smell of old paper. But it was warmer than that. Plants by the windows. Mismatched mugs. A record player in the corner, with some jazz playing low. He took my coat, asked me what I wanted to drink, and handed me a glass of wine like we'd done this a dozen times before. We didn't talk about school. We didn't talk about the letter. We just talked about books, yes, but also stupid childhood stories, our mutual hatred of group projects, his cat that had run away once and come back 3 days later with a chewed-off ear. We laughed more than I expected. And I didn't want the night to end, but eventually, we were sitting on the couch, the lights dimmed, 2 empty glasses on the coffee table, and that stillness came again. He turned to me. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Yeah." "When you wrote that letter," his voice was low now, almost tentative, "was it really just a joke?" I didn't answer right away, because I finally knew the answer. "No," I said. "Not really. I mean, it started as a joke. But when I wrote it, I think I meant more than I realized." He didn't speak, so I kept going. "I think I saw you clearer than I wanted to admit, and it scared the hell out of me." He nodded, slowly. "Me too," and then he leaned in. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't some intense cinematic thing. It was slow, deliberate, like he was giving me time to pull away. I didn't. When his lips touched mine, everything in me went still. Just for a second. Then I kissed him back, and everything I'd been holding in, every question, every fear, every restless moment replaying that damn letter in my head, melted. It wasn't a joke anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. There are moments you can't rehearse, moments that unfold so quietly, so unexpectedly, that by the time you realize they're important, they've already passed. Kissing Nathan on his couch that night was one of those moments. It wasn't dramatic. There was no dramatic score playing in the background, no sudden crashing realization, no fireworks. Just the soft pressure of his lips, the slow way his hands slid against the side of my face, the subtle, shared breath between us when we finally pulled away. And silence. Not awkward silence. Something heavier than that. Denser. Like we'd both stepped into something neither of us fully understood, but didn't want to leave. He sat back against the couch, eyes closed for a second, and then looked at me like he was trying to figure out if it really happened. "Was that okay?" he asked, softly. I nodded. "Yeah, that was very okay," he smiled. Not his usual polite professor smile, but something real. Vulnerable. After that, we didn't say much. He walked me to the door when it got late, our fingers brushing as I slipped on my coat. It was the kind of goodbye that made me feel like the next time I saw him, something would be different. That whatever this was, we'd both decided it was real. And it was. The next few months were a balancing act. Not because we were hiding anything, but because we were cautious. We had rules. We didn't meet up on campus. We didn't talk every day. We took it slow. No sudden declarations, no rushing into anything we weren't ready to name. But the truth is, it didn't feel slow. It felt right. We'd go on walks late at night, when campus was quiet, share a beer at his place, sit on the floor listening to records while arguing about whether Virginia Woolf was secretly just horny and sad. He said yes. I said same. We kissed often. Sometimes slow and lingering, sometimes laughing into each other's mouths when one of us said something stupid. And somehow, I stopped feeling like I was tiptoeing through some forbidden territory. I felt grounded, like I had stumbled into something I hadn't known I needed. Leo, of course, lost his mind when I told him. "You mean to tell me," he said, pacing in our kitchen, "you're literally dating the man you once wrote a fake letter to about his whiteboard handwriting?" I just grinned. "Yeah, weird, right?" "Weird? That's not weird. That's iconic. That's the gay academic rom-com we all needed." I threw a dish towel at him. "Please never say gay academic rom-com again." He ignored me, eyes wide with mock awe. "Do you call him professor in bed?" "Leo." "Do you?" "No. But would you?" "Stop." Despite his teasing, Leo never asked too many personal questions. He gave me space. And maybe that was the most unexpected part of all of this. How normal it began to feel. How something that once felt impossible now just fit into my life. Finals came and went. I graduated. Nathan was at the ceremony, somewhere in the faculty section, clapping just like everyone else. We didn't speak that day. Too many people, too many cameras, but he sent me a text that night. "Him. You looked really proud up there." I was proud too. Me. I was mostly sweating. Him. I meant what I said back in December. I'd like to keep finding out where this goes. If you still want that. Me. I do. So much. And so we did. That summer, things changed. There were no more unspoken rules, no more secrets. We were just us. Nathan invited me to meet his friends, other professors mostly. I introduced him to my older sister, who grilled him over brunch and then whispered, "He's hot. Don't mess this up." We took a weekend trip to the coast and got sunburned and drunk off cheap wine and fell asleep on a too small bed listening to the ocean. It was never perfect. We had arguments. We got in each other's heads. He was private in ways I wasn't used to. I overthought everything. But we talked. We worked through it. We kept showing up. And one night, lying in bed with my head on his chest, he said, "You know, that letter kind of ruined me." I blinked. "In a good way. In the best way," he said. It shook something loose in me. I smiled, half asleep. "Want me to write you another one?" He kissed the top of my head. "Only if it's worse than the first one." Challenge accepted. A year later, I found that original letter again, still sitting in a dusty folder on my desktop. Professor Crush _ final .docx. I opened it, reread it, laughed at the absurdity of it all. The over-the-top metaphors, the fake desperation, the way I referred to his disdain for Foucault as erotically academic. And then I opened a new doc and started writing a new one. This time, I signed it. Yours. In the margins, between the lines, and everywhere else I didn't know I'd find you. A.